It started in the most unremarkable place. A Tuesday night, the kind of night that feels like wallpaper. I was in the laundry room of our apartment building, basement level, humming machines, a single flickering bulb near the dryer row. I had my headphones in but wasn't playing anything, just letting the silence stretch while I stared at the old TV bolted in the corner. It only got 3 channels, and I picked one at random. Some rerun sitcom, the canned laughter too loud for the space. I was the only one there. Or I thought I was. The door opened, and she walked in, Ms. Delaney. My neighbor across the hall. She carried a small basket of clothes tucked against her hip. Mid-40s, maybe late, I never asked. I knew her by her quiet. She always said hello in the hallway, never more than that. But tonight, she looked at me like she was surprised to find me there. "Oh," she said. Just that one word. I nodded back. "Hey." I expected her to take a machine and keep to herself. But after loading her washer, she set the basket down and, without asking, sat in the plastic chair right next to mine. The whole row was empty, but she chose the one beside me. The sitcom laugh track filled the gap. "You like this show?" she asked, crossing one leg over the other. "Not really," I said. "Just, it's on." She gave a small smile, not quite amusement, not quite pity. "That's usually how it goes with this place." I wanted to laugh but didn't. Instead, I noticed the small things. How she folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them. How she tilted her head, like she was trying to decide if she should keep talking. I've never been good at filling silence. Most of my life, silence just expands. Like the unsent text to a friend sitting in my drafts. Or the unanswered call from my dad I let ring out last weekend. But this silence was different. It pressed against me. "Long day?" she asked eventually. "Yeah. You?" She nodded. "Always." Then she leaned back in the chair, eyes half on the TV, half on me. "You live across the hall, don't you?" I smiled, a little awkward. "Yeah. Apartment 2B. What do you mean?" Sometimes the silence makes more sense than the laughter. I didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the screen, but I could feel her attention sliding sideways, waiting for me. "Maybe I'll try that," I said. We let it hang there. When her phone buzzed in her pocket, she checked the screen, frowned, then put it face down beside her. No explanation. I don't know why I noticed, but I did. When my own dryer buzzed a few minutes later, I stood up, folded the clothes slower than I needed to. She stayed seated, watching the flickering TV. As I lifted the basket, she finally spoke again. "Next time," she said, not looking at me, "maybe bring popcorn. Make it a real show." I froze a second too long, then managed a nod. In the hall, walking back to my apartment, my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. It read, "Don't forget the popcorn." I stood there, staring at my screen, the hum of machines faint through the walls, not sure whether to laugh, or knock back on her door. The next evening, I wasn't sure if I was waiting for it to happen again, or if I just needed clean socks. I carried my basket down the hall slower than usual, pausing when I passed her door. A faint hum of music leaked through, something low and old, maybe jazz, maybe just the muffled crackle of a record. In the laundry room, she was already there. Sitting in the same chair as before, a paperback open on her lap. When she looked up, she didn't look surprised. "You're late," she said. I smiled, uncertain. Didn't realize we had a schedule. Her book snapped shut. "Guess we do now." We let the machines start their rhythm, then she set the book aside. A small thermos sat next to her basket. She twisted it open, poured tea into the cap, then another. Handed one to me without asking. I hesitated. "You sure? Too much for me anyway." She raised her cup in a small toast. To sitcom reruns and bad lighting. I clinked mine against hers. The tea was lukewarm, faintly sweet. She watched me drink, and I felt the weight of it. "My son's about your age," she said suddenly. I nearly choked. She smirked at my reaction, but her eyes softened. "He's at college in Oregon. Engineering. Always liked to build things. He barely calls anymore." I set the cup down carefully on my knee. "That must be hard." She shrugged, though it didn't look like a shrug that fit. "You get used to people leaving. The trick is not to expect them to come back." Her words landed heavy, like she hadn't meant to say them out loud. She reached for her thermos again, but her hand hovered instead, resting against the plastic chair arm. I wanted to ask more, but didn't. My throat felt tight. Instead, I said, "My mom texts too much. Sometimes twice in one day." That earned me a real laugh. Not loud, but real. "Be nice to her. One day she'll stop." Something flickered in her face when she said that. I didn't know if it was regret or warning. We sat there for a while, listening to the machine spin. Every so often, I glanced at her hands, the way her nails tapped faintly on the thermos lid, restless but delicate. My mind kept wandering places I didn't want it to go, imagining if her hand brushed mine by accident, what I'd do, how I'd cover it up. I hated that I was thinking about it. Hated that it felt like a line I couldn't unsee now that I had. When my washer beeped, I stood. She stood too, like it was choreographed. We sorted our clothes side by side, shoulders nearly touching. She reached across me for a stray sock, her sleeve brushing my arm. Just fabric, just an accident. But it lingered in my skin longer than it should have. "Careful," she murmured, not looking up. "You'll wrinkle it." She meant the shirt in my hand. But her voice carried something else. I folded the shirt slowly, careful and deliberate, aware of the silence pressing around us. When I looked up, she was already watching me. Not smiling, not frowning, just holding me there with a gaze that said more than either of us was willing to. The third night, I told myself not to go down. I let my laundry sit in the basket longer than usual, scrolling pointlessly through my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting for something. But the silence of my apartment pressed too hard. By 9, I was in the basement again. She was already there. Always there first. This time she wasn't reading. She was just, sitting. Watching the spin of the machines like it mattered. "Thought you might have skipped," she said without turning. "Almost did." Her lips curved slightly. "Almost." I sat beside her, closer than before. The chair squeaked under my weight, loud in the still room. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, the distance between us thin as breath. "You ever feel like you're wasting time?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," I said. "Too fast. Too honest." She smiled, but her eyes stayed on the floor. "Yeah. Me too." I wanted to ask what she meant. Wanted to know if the wasting was about her son, or her work, or something else. But the words stuck. I only nodded. A beat of silence. Too loud. Then the door swung open. We both straightened, like kids caught doing something wrong. It was Jake, from upstairs. Carrying a trash bag, headphones looped around his neck. He gave me a quick nod, then noticed her. "Hey, Miss Delaney." She smiled politely. "Evening." Jake lingered a second too long, looking between us, then tossed the bag in the bin and left. The door thudded closed. Neither of us spoke. She exhaled softly, shaking her head. "Feels like being 16 again. Sneaking around when you're not." Her laugh was quiet, but her hands twisted in her lap. She didn't look at me. I didn't think, I started. Then stopped. "What?" she asked, eyes finally meeting mine. I didn't think anyone would notice. She held my gaze for a long second. Longer than safe. Then she looked away. They notice more than you think. I swallowed, throat dry. My dryer buzzed. I stood, but too slowly. My hands fumbled with the hot fabric, clothes slipping back into the basket. She came up beside me to fold one of her own. Our arms brushed again. Not accidental this time. Neither of us moved. The air thickened. She set her folded towel down carefully, then turned slightly toward me. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of her shampoo. For a heartbeat, everything else vanished, the humming machines, the flickering TV, the thought of Jake's glance. Just her. Her lips parted. My breath caught. And then, she stepped back. Careful, she said softly, echoing herself from before. But this time her eyes lingered. I froze with a shirt half folded, every nerve stretched tight, waiting. Hoping. But she only smiled faintly, turned back to her basket, and smoothed the fabric with deliberate calm. A near crossing. A door that opened for a second, then shut. Leaving me with the sound of my own pulse in the quiet room. The fourth night, it wasn't the laundry room. I found her outside, sitting on the bench near the entrance, a paper cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The streetlight above flickered, making her face shift between shadow and pale gold. I almost walked past. Almost. You're late, she said, without looking up. I stopped, shoved my hands in my pockets. Didn't know we had a bench schedule, too. That earned the faintest smile. She patted the empty space beside her. Sit. I did. The wood was cold through my jeans. We sat in silence, the city hummed distant, the night air damp. Her cup steamed faintly. Family, mostly. Family, she echoed. She tapped her thumb against the cup lid. A soft, repetitive sound. My son thinks I'm solid. Steady. The safe one. I don't think he'd like knowing otherwise. I turned, studying her profile, the sharp line of her jaw. I rubbed the edge of my thumb raw against my palm. She noticed. She always noticed. You should be careful, she said finally. It looks worse than it is. I should have nodded. Agreed. But something in me pushed back. Is it worse? I asked. Quiet. Careful. That broke her composure. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp, searching, afraid of the answer. For a moment, neither of us breathed. She set her cup down on the bench between us, then pressed her palms against her knees. You're 23. You should be out with people your age. Not, she gestured vaguely between us. This. Her voice cracked on the last word. Barely. I swallowed. I don't think about it like that. Her eyes closed for half a second too long. When they opened again, they were wet. Not enough for tears, but enough to glint under the streetlight. I don't know what you think this is, she whispered. Me neither, I admitted. The honesty hung between us, naked and raw. Then she reached for her cup, but her fingers brushed mine instead. Just a touch. Not even a second long. But she didn't pull away right away, either. The next few days, she wasn't there. I told myself it didn't matter. I went down at the usual time anyway, basket in hand, rehearsing excuses in my head if I happened to see her. But the chair beside mine stayed empty. No thermos. No paperback. Just the hum of machines and the flicker of that useless TV. By the third night, I caught myself waiting in the hall outside my apartment, listening for her door. Nothing. The silence felt staged. I thought about knocking once. Just to say, what? Laundry's piling up. Haven't seen you. None of it sounded right. I ended up back inside, scrolling my phone, opening and closing old texts. Writing one to her number, "Everything okay?" then deleting it before sending. On Friday, she reappeared. But not downstairs. I found her at the mailboxes. She was dressed sharper than I'd ever seen her, dark dress, hair pinned back. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Big night?" I asked. "Something like that," she said, tucking an envelope into her purse. She didn't linger. Just a polite nod before slipping past. Her perfume trailed behind, faint but impossible to ignore. That night, I stayed awake listening for her footsteps in the hall. Around midnight, I heard them, staggered, slower. The jingle of her keys. A low, muffled voice. Then silence. The next day, I saw her again in the laundry room. But she wasn't alone. A man, mid-40s, maybe older, was with her. He leaned against the machine, talking low, too casual. She folded clothes quickly, not looking at me when I walked in. "This is," she started, but her voice faltered. The man stuck out his hand. "Tom." I shook it, unsure what expression I wore. He turned back to her. "I'll grab the rest from the car." And then he was gone. The second the door shut, she pressed her hand to her forehead, exhaling sharp. "Don't," she said quietly. I didn't say anything. "I know." She still didn't look at me. "It's easier that way." I wanted to ask who he was. Wanted to demand some explanation. But the words caught. My chest felt tight, like if I spoke, something fragile would shatter. Instead, I just nodded and started my wash. She stayed until Tom came back in with another basket, then gathered her things quickly. As she passed me, she touched my sleeve lightly. Barely there. A warning, or an apology. Then she was gone. That night, I opened her number in my phone again. Typed, "I don't care who he is. I just want," but my thumb hovered. Then backspaced. The screen went blank. The message stayed unsent. And the chair beside mine stayed empty. It was raining the night it broke open. Not dramatic thunderstorm rain, just a steady drizzle that blurred the streetlights outside. I found her sitting on the stairs, one floor down from our apartments, a half-empty glass of wine balanced on the step beside her. She didn't move when I approached, didn't even look up. Just said, "You walk louder than you think." I sat one step above, close enough that my knee brushed the railing. The smell of rain mixed with her perfume, faint but sharp. "Sorry," I said. "You're not." She finally glanced at me, her eyes tired but steady. "You haven't been around." I didn't know if it was accusation or relief. Maybe both. "You haven't either," I said. "That's different." She took a small sip from the glass. "I was avoiding you." The bluntness landed harder than I expected. My throat tightened. "Why?" Her laugh was low, humorless. "Do I really need to explain?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted her to hand me something clear, something I could hold on to. Instead, I said, "Maybe." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "Because you make me feel younger than I am. And older at the same time. It's not fair to you. Or me." Silence pressed in. Rain tapped against the stairwell window. I swallowed. Maybe it doesn't have to be fair. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, searching. "You don't know what you're saying." "Maybe I don't," I admitted. "But I know what it feels like when you're not there. And I know what it feels like when you are." Her breath hitched, barely audible. She looked away quickly, staring at the floor. "You shouldn't, but I do," I cut in. My voice was low, unsteady, but the words felt truer than anything I'd said in months. "I think about you. Even when I tell myself not to." Her hand tightened around the glass. For a second, I thought she might throw it. Instead, she set it down carefully on the step. "I can't promise you anything," she whispered. "Not the way you want." "I'm not asking for a promise," I said. "Just, the truth." The air between us felt electric. Heavy. Finally, she turned to me fully. Her face was closer than it had ever been, lines softened by the dim light. "The truth is, I've thought about it too." The words lingered, fragile, like glass that could break if touched. I didn't move. Neither did she. But the confession hung between us, enough to change everything. She reached out, slowly, and placed her hand over mine. Just that. Warm, steady, trembling slightly. We didn't kiss. We didn't move closer. We just sat there, listening to the rain, her hand resting on mine as if saying, "I see you. I can't undo it. I don't want to." "Okay," I whispered. Her lips curved, almost a smile, but softer. "Okay." It didn't happen all at once. Weeks went by. Some nights we crossed paths in the laundry room, some nights on the bench outside, sometimes not at all. But the absence no longer felt like rejection. It was just, life. I learned the small things about her, the ones you only catch if you're patient. She hated when her coffee went cold, but always forgot to drink it fast enough. She hummed under her breath when she cooked, songs I didn't recognize but always the same tune. She folded her napkins into neat squares without noticing, then left them stacked like tiny unfinished thoughts. She learned me too, in ways I hadn't expected. She noticed when my mood shifted before I did. She remembered which nights I had class, which mornings I stayed in bed too long. Once, she left a thermos of tea at my door. She leaned back, letting her shoulder brush mine. Not careful, not hesitant, just natural. Like it had always been meant that way. "I used to think I'd missed it," she said quietly. "Love. Connection. Whatever you want to call it. That window closed for me a long time ago." I looked at her hands resting on her lap. The same hands that once twisted restlessly, unsure. Tonight, they were still. "Maybe it just opened somewhere else," I said. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sadness and relief. "Maybe. We didn't need more than that. Life wasn't perfect." She still got calls she ignored, messages she didn't answer. I still left drafts unsent, words caught in my throat. But the difference was, at the end of the day, we had this, quiet evenings, shared cups of tea, the warmth of sitting side by side when everything else felt too sharp. It wasn't a story we'd tell anyone. Not loudly, not even fully. It belonged to us. The machine still hummed in the basement. The sitcom rerun still played too loud. But every time she glanced at me when the laugh track swelled, I knew we understood the same thing: the silence always made more sense than the laughter. And that was enough. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. The popcorn bag crinkled between us. Neither of us moved it away. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," I echoed. And that was the whole story.